Well, hello, everybody. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the country. My name is Garrett Schmidt. I'm the managing editor for BBC Exhibit Hall, and I'd like to welcome you to today's live webinar hosted by MRO Health, and it is titled Navigating MSSP Quality Reporting, EHR Connection versus QRDA 1. And so it's a niche topic, but I know a lot of you in the audience today are very interested in hearing more about this. So, and I happened to get a little sneak peek ahead of time, and I think you'll really enjoy the presentation today. A few items of note before we get started is everyone has joined today in listen-only mode. So this is a traditional webinar format. We're not seeing all the big list of faces or anything like that, so we can't hear you or see you. So don't worry about that. However, we do want to hear from you, and we are going to have a time for some Q&A towards the end of the presentation. So if you have a question at any point during the webinar today, go ahead and drop it in there's a little module that you have that you can put questions in, and we're going to get to as many as we can in the allocated time. If we don't get to yours for some reason, don't worry, someone will reach out to you via email afterwards to make sure that we get your question answered. So even if we're wrapping up at the last second, go ahead and drop your question in there and someone will be in touch with you. Finally, the session today is being recorded. So what's going to happen is probably about an hour after we wrap up today, you will receive an email, and it will have a link to the recording as well as the slides that you can download, some other information about how to get in touch with our speakers today. So feel free to view that again at your leisure or share it with colleagues and friends. We hope that you do. And then finally, without further ado, I wanted to introduce our speaker today, Mr. James Pelletier, and he is the National Director of Provider Quality at MRO. And so he's going to be our guide for today. So welcome, James.
Thank you very much, Garrett. Glad to be here. And welcome everyone on that's joined us on the webinar. You'll be hearing my voice a lot over the next half hour or so, but hopefully this is time that will be productive and educational for all of you. I certainly have a lot to say, I guess, on this particular topic. You may actually have seen or may see in the future a blog that's on the MRO website and in our LinkedIn social profile where I talk about this particular subject. And the overall topic of MSSP quality reporting. This is, as Garrett mentioned, sort of a niche topic, and having taken a kind of a look at the registration list, it looks like there's people on this meeting that will have some knowledge of what MSSP reporting means. And specifically, some of the changes that have been in effect, I guess, for several years now, but are, we're facing a deadline and a change with respect to how we are reporting on quality going forward, starting in 2025. So before I get there, I will advance the slides a couple and give you a little bit more background about who I am and what I'm doing. As Garrett mentioned, my title is National Director of Provider Quality. And what that means at MRO is that I am responsible for our value-based care side of the business. So MRO works in a variety of different areas, but one of the ways that we're helping organizations is in the challenge that I just kind of set up, helping organizations address the new MSSP and QPP reporting requirements. And what brought me here is, a history in healthcare technology. And over the last 12 years, a real focus on population health management and all the different initiatives that go along with value-based care. Things like care coordination, data aggregation, data analytics, and patient engagement are very, very near and dear to my heart, and something that I've been working on, as I said, for well over a decade now. I've worked for some of the big data platform companies, population health kind of companies, and I've worked for some of the big EHR companies that I'm sure you're all familiar with. And, again, throughout that history, it's given me a great opportunity to work with some of the most cutting edge healthcare organizations throughout the country. What I've found, and what you guys probably know as well, is that the great thing about value-based care is that that's where the innovation really gets introduced to most organizations. So, these type of initiatives are typically most well adopted by organizations that have some sort of risk as it relates to how good of a job that they do. So there are incentives in place to improve quality or provide the best possible quality, because you'll get reimbursed for that effort. So I am coming up to you from Maine. Hopefully I have a stable internet connection. I think I do so far, but I spend a lot of time outdoors. I coach hockey, and lots of outdoor activities. The one thing I say about living out in Maine is that I have lots of different hobbies, but I'm not good at any of them because the season's always changing. So let me tell you a little bit more about MRO. The fact of the matter is MRO has been around for a very long time. And a lot of the organizations on this call has probably done business with MRO in one form or another. Some people know us. I guess I should take a step back. The overall umbrella of who we are and what we do is that we are a clinical data exchange platform. And some people do know us through the left side of the box of the slide, I should say, where we are responsible for ensuring that the right clinical information is getting in the right hands at the right time. And so for some of our customers, that means that when they get requests for information, they put us in charge with both a technology and service that gives us those requests, and ultimately we're sending out the right clinical information in a timely fashion to the lawyers or payers or patients in some cases that are requesting those clinical records. On the right-hand side, you will notice the ACO and the registry stuff. That's kind of on topic to what we'll be talking about today. But just know as you look around the screen, there are a lot of different use cases that we're helping organizations to address. And there's a lot of cool things and related things that sort of empower our capabilities and allow us to really align our goals with our customers when it comes to ultimately our performance for our customers. So let me talk a little bit more about our experience, especially in the registry space. MRO acquired a company a few years ago by the name of FigMD. And just that name, I think, again, a lot of people may know us from that. FigMD has been working with medical societies and non-for-profit, colleges of medicine, all very specialty specific. And these are the organizations that are looking to acquire data from providers in order to look at things that improve patient outcomes. So they work with a company like FigMD and or now MRO to go out and connect to all those different practices and providers who wish to participate in those medical societies and registries. And ultimately, FigMD/MRO has been pulling data directly from EHRs, or organizations are pushing data from their EHRs directly to us so that we can normalize, aggregate, and provide that patient information to those different societies and specialties to run their analysis. And then, you may call them quality measures or analytics, but they're looking at best practices. They're looking to look at different cohorts of patients, slice and dice them in different ways to see what type of care is best and how can we improve based on the data that we're finding from all these providers throughout the country. In that experience, it's given us the ability to connect to lots of different systems. We've connected to over 150 different EHRs throughout our history. There's virtually no EHR that we haven't worked with, even though they get acquired and their names change. We have that experience in having either pulled or pushed data from those systems many, many times throughout the years. We have been in the quality reporting business for several years as well. Today, we work with 54 different ACOs throughout the country. All of those are MSSP ACOs. So some of you may be on this call, or some of you may know some of our customers in this space as well. But, again, lots of different numbers that you're seeing on the screen here. But the main thing that you should know is that we've pulled basically every data element out of EHRs that you can think of. We do limit the data that we pull based on the, what it is that we're measuring. Um, but again, throughout our history, there's lots of different types of quality measures and specialties that are pulling throughout the patient record. And one of the things that we know about working with EHRs is that providers document differently from one group to the next, from one practice to the next. And even within a particular practice, physicians tend to document differently. And so what we found throughout, again, that the history of our registry business is that we often are working on an ongoing basis with practices to ensure that they're getting the credit that they deserve. So when they tell us that the data is there, it's just in a different place, we can remap data in order to ensure that that the calculations that we're doing are a true reflection of the care that's being provided. And that's especially on topic when it comes to what we're talking about here today as we go forward. The other cool thing about MRO is that we are a pioneer in MSSP reporting. We've been doing web interface reporting for ACOs in the past, but since the new requirements have been optional in performance year 2021, we were partnered with ACOs that became some of the first to have successfully reported. And something, again, that we're very, very proud of, those are the ACOs that all have multiple TINs and multiple EHRs, whereas the other three, I think, ACOs in 2021 were ACOs that all were on one EHR. And they, have certain advantages, and their challenges are slightly different than those MSSPs that have networks of physicians that each have their own EHRs and their own, of course, practices. So before I ramble too much further on that, let's get into our topic for today and talk about, what is an EHR connection, what's a QRDA1 file, and why is it important for you? Why, in my mind, is it potentially one of the biggest risks as you go forward associated with your quality performance? And how important is your quality performance, I think, is one of the questions that we all have to ask ourselves, because this decision in and of itself will have a big impact on your overall quality and whether or not you're getting credit for the quality of care that you're truly providing. So I do want to dive right into this topic, but I do also want to level set. There's a lot of different changes that are forcing these types of decisions, and I've alluded to it multiple times, where we are now going from the web interface reporting standards to the new QPP recording standards that have three different options for your MSSP. That's ECQM reporting, MIPS CQM reporting, or Medicare CQM reporting. And each one of those have different ways in which they calculate and allow you to measure your quality. And each of those have different thresholds and incentives based on how you actually do perform based on that particular measurement. So the big changes, though, are that, in the web interface world, which we're still living in today, I know all the MSSPs that are on this call are probably at minimum still doing web interface reporting. At most, you're doing dual reporting, where you're doing the new method as well as the old method, and Medicare is going to take your highest scores. But what are the big differences? So one thing that Medicare did do for us is they took your quality measures within the web interface world from 10 to 3. So now we're focused on hypertension, depression, and diabetes. Now, we've always been measuring those, and those have always been one of the three quality measures that we've been looking at within the web interface world. But there are lots of much more important, I think, requirements that are being put in place as well. You have to have all the practices that are in your ACO have to have a certified EHR. It has to be a 2015 Cures Act certified EHR. No longer is paper an option, and older versions are, again, not an option when it comes to how you report. You have to report not just on a sampling of patients like we did with the web interface world, where you had 250 sample patients for each measure that you went out and looked for data on, and then went into the web interface and manually entered your data. Now they want a direct connection with those EHRs. And it's not just 250 sample patients they want data on. It is either your entire Medicare population for each provider, or it's an all payer, all patient requirement. And so every patient that you've seen needs to have the same quality of care as your at-risk Medicare population that are within your ACO in order for you to get the maximum possible credit for quality moving forward. So they're trying to make it easy by doing this less manually, but the requirement is a lot more data, a lot more rigorous measurement when it comes to how you are able to calculate your performance. And of course, all of this now needs to be submitted to a qualified registry. So it's not as easy as simply logging into the portal and doing it yourself. When you have multiple TINs and multiple EHRs, you are required to work with a qualified registry in order to submit that, and oftentimes working with another vendor in order to produce the right report that ultimately gets sent to CMS. So that report's actually called a QRDA3 file, not to confuse everyone, but we're not necessarily talking about QRDA3 today. QRDA3 is the output of all the different QRDA1 files that you're accumulating from your different EHR. So what is a QRDA1 file? Ultimately, it's just a document. It's a new standard that it was put in place as part of the certification that we just talked about with respect to your EHRs. So by certifying, EHRs are now required to produce a QRDA1 file, which is going to contain all the different data that we need within the PQRS program and the MIPS program to calculate quality as we move forward. So you could think about it as an Excel file. Essentially, it's a data push. So you'll hear me refer to these kind of interchangeably. There's a lot of different data push files out there. CCDA files. There are, just about any document that you can produce, CSV file, etc. Those are files that are being produced by a system like an EHR and then being being consumed by other systems like ours in order to do different calculations. So that's relevant clinical information, it's demographic data. This is, again, what a QRDA1 file is, and also I think presents one of the first topics as far as risk. Has your EHR company successfully been able to produce a QRDA1 file? Is it certified? Are your practices certified? How confident are you that file that's being produced is producing the right information that's needed? I have seen lots of different versions from lots of different vendors, and I think there is a lot of concern out there in the industry that not all QRDA1 files are the same, and they could potentially be not complete or accurate, and that presents an issue with respect to looking to your EHR company to now fix however they're mapping data back to that QRDA1 file. So I'll leave that there. This is just a sample of what does it look like. Again, think about it as an Excel spreadsheet, columns and rows with data that you're pulling from predefined areas of the medical record. And the simple fact of the matter is, with any push file, the vendor that's receiving those push files, they're doing the best job they can with the data that they receive. And so what that means is that, we've all heard this in the analytics world. Bad data in is bad data out. But from the perspective of a vendor like MRO, without the ability to be able to see upstream, there is some challenges associated with understanding why a quality measure may have failed versus did the quality measure fail because the patient wasn't screened for depression, or they were screened but it was documented in the wrong field, or it wasn't documented at all within the structured part of the record, but the physician did document it within the notes as they were describing what happened with that particular visit. So these are different types of scenarios that you can't necessarily know with a push file like a QRDA1. So I'm going to leave that there and let you kind of marinate on that for a minute and think about, well, if there are challenges associated before the QRDA one, how am I going to address those problems and identify those problems? Is it going to be manual? And will my EHR company work with me in order to help fix those problems and alleviate those challenges? So what is EHR integration? I'll refer to this as the pull method. There are lots of different ways that you can pull data out of EHRs, and we'll typically look at that as a feed coming from one system to the other. There are different, again, ways that you can connect. A lot of times we think of HL7 as a data pull. Fire is another example of a data pull where you have these integrations that are pre-built and data is flowing periodically or in some cases near real time in order to power other systems and make sure that systems are in sync. What this offers, again, is the ability to take out any manual effort, both from the practice side as well as on the vendor side, rather than forcing an organization to push us files and all the efforts that go along with that. With QRDA ones, it may require a call to the vendor, the EMR vendor, I should say, and say, hey, I need a QRDA one file. When can you provide that to me? There could be a delay. It may take multiple calls for the vendor to respond before you ultimately get what you need. And then, of course, that data is eventually pushed over to us. And in some cases, files change, formats change, columns change. And if there are ever any issues with those push files, if something changed between us and the EHR, those requests have to, again, be circled back. And ultimately, it's the practice's responsibility to manage that. With these direct integrations, again, we have much more control. We can get information automatically. Things are streamlined, and our ability to see not only the data that we are pulling, but the data that we're not is huge. Because we are, again, have the capability to remap data whenever we're finding that data is just simply lives somewhere else and for this department or for this physician. The data is there, but you're just not getting it the right way. And as a vendor, we have a lot more control now over that process. So we get this data, we process it, it's automatically queued up for use. We can pull data as frequently as we want. So unlike QRDA1 files, maybe you're thinking about doing a QRDA1 upload once per year. I wouldn't, but maybe that's what you're thinking. We'll just kind of dump it all in and then we'll measure and report. Maybe you're thinking about doing it quarterly. Oftentimes with these pulls, we're doing it at least monthly. So you have the ability to see how am I performing at any given time. You have the ability to see where your gaps are. And of course, you have your gap reasons. So you know where to focus your time and energy on the patients that, again, you can quickly get to a successful screening or whatever the case may be. So I've come to our first polling question. I'm going to hand it over to Garrett. He's got all the instructions for you here.
All right, I'm about to pull this up on your screen here, and you will see this momentarily. Okay, and the question is, has your organization chosen a method for data acquisition yet? And by the way, these polls are anonymous, and we're going to show you the results here so you can kind of see where you stack among your colleagues. But don't worry about that. You can go ahead and give your information here, and again, it's completely anonymous. We still have some results coming in, all right, but it looks like most of it has slowed down. So we'll give it about another 5 long seconds, and then we'll show you the results. James, are you able to see that on your screen, by the way?
I do not see the results.
Okay, that's fine. I'll read them out to you. All right, so I think all the results have come in. I'm going to go ahead and end it out and share the screen. Okay, the results are, yes, QRDA one file, we have 30%. Yes, direct EMR integration, we have 14%. No decision yet is 43%, and that kind of takes the cake. And then we are not an MSSP, which is 14% of the folks in the audience today.
Okay, perfect. Super. So 14% versus, or 3%. What was it? Oh, 30% are doing
I can
QRDA1
read them
and
again if you need.
14% are doing direct EMR integration. I got it.
Right.
All right, perfect. That's good to know. And actually a little bit surprising if I'm being perfectly honest. QRDA1 files I think are the go-to. I think for most organizations, it's what they think will be the easy button. But having done this for 4 reporting periods now, for so many different ACOs, we know where we can pull data from. It's not just QRDA1 or nothing. Um, but again, we understand that for a lot of organizations, that's what their EMR is telling them is the only option they have. So did not mean to move that forward. So that's good to know that again, people are looking at direct integration as an option, and perhaps you're already working with MRO. If not, or if you're undecided, certainly love to talk to you about what we can offer. And ultimately, organizations like us that have the direct EMR integration capability, we can do both. There's hybrid approaches that are often employed based on the scope of the ACO. Some of you out there have hundreds of EHRs within your network. Some of you may only be dealing with 4 or 5. All of those are different scenarios that we can, again, help you address and do what's best for your organization. So that's important to know as well. So diving a little bit deeper into these kind of important decision paths, QRDA versus EHR. Um, I've mentioned some of these, already as I've been rambling on different slides. But the timeliness of data and the accuracy of data is an extremely important part of having a direct EHR connection versus those QRDA1 files. I'm not here to tell you that your QRDA1 files are all crap or they're not accurate. More than likely, they're all pretty accurate. And for some EHRs, there just may be some out there that are less accurate than others, or there just may be some practices that are going to experience some challenges associated with making this change, whether it be documenting in the right fields in order to get the credit for the care that they provided, or a lot of different staff, whether it be practice administrators or people that actually work for the ACO, care coordinators, care navigators, etc., that are relaying, the, the challenges that certain providers may be having and what they need to do different as they move forward. The problem is as you go forward, the longer you go before you uncover where the problem's coming from and how to address them, the more months of data that you've already accumulated for patients that are part of your reporting, that you either have to go back and try to fix, or you just have to take the hit in terms of the performance that you're seeing for everything that happened before you address that problem. So having that real-time data, again, one huge selling point, I think, for a direct EHR connection, gives you accuracy, timeliness, and just makes things a lot easier when it comes to the actual submission itself. Data exchange. So we talked about how frequently data is being updated. Are you planning on getting your QRDA ones once per year? Maybe you are planning on doing it monthly. I'm sure that there's a cost associated with that, which we'll actually get to, because certainly there's a cost to everything when it comes to these types of solutions. So we'll talk about, again, the cost consequences of each of these decisions. Our mapping capability, again, I think is a huge one for us. And some people may be wondering, with a direct EHR connection, who's managing all this? Services are a big part of any vendor that's going to be aligning with your goals to maximize your performance. So it's one thing to give you, the ACO, the data and say, go ahead and run with it. And that would be nice, I think, in a lot of cases to say, hey, this particular EHR or this provider is underperforming, and we can tell you why. That would be awesome if most vendors could do that at the ACO level and say, hey, go out and get it. With us, we do actually have direct connections and relationships at the practice level. So we're working with them on an ongoing basis and identifying these areas for improvement, and either, again, working with them to remap data or providing educational content on who you might want to provide feedback to and how they can document better in order to get the credit that they deserve. So let's talk about those costs that I mentioned earlier. Direct EHR connections and creating a longitudinal patient record where you're aggregating and normalizing data and really having sort of the source of truth for your patient records. That's always been a very expensive thing to do. And for the most part, MSSPs or ACOs or value-based care organizations, they've been doing a lot of this type of analytics based on claims data. Because with claims data, you get one data source and it's already normalized and aggregated for you. It doesn't matter where the source came from. So you do the best job you can with claims data. And for the most part, you get pretty far with that. But there's certain things that claims data just doesn't have. So we've all been heard pitches from different vendors, data aggregation vendors like us, that have looked to create that longitudinal patient record where you get real-time clinical data aggregation, so it's not delayed like claims are. You actually will not only see that an order has been placed for a lab, but the results of that lab all through that type of connection. But the challenge has always been, but it costs too much. It's a heavy lift. It's not something that I need right now because claims gives me enough. I believe this new reporting requirement is hopefully going to accelerate the ability for organizations to get that level of data because, again, Medicare is kind of forcing us to do that. And if your choice is between QRDA1 files and a direct EHR connection, you may think, well, what's the cost comparison? I know that EHRs will often charge for either one of these. So I can't necessarily talk about what every EHR is going to charge you for us to have access to the EHR and read-only access to the EHR. Some, and there are, again, I hate to name names, but there are some EHR companies that will charge more than others. I've heard that some EHRs are going to charge about $250 every time you request a QRDA1 file. So again, that's a cost that's associated with doing either one of these options. There is a cost with either one. And of course, as a vendor who's uploading these QRDA1 files, we have a cost that's associated with that. We also have a cost associated with integrating directly with EHRs. But what you'll find is that if you do at least quarterly QRDA1 files, that quickly becomes much more expensive than a direct EHR connection. So I can't speak to your situations in terms of what exactly the cost comparison is, but I can speak to my experience in having quoted out a lot of this stuff and having worked with ACOs with, again, lots of different EHRs, each with costs associated with them, and of course, fees in order to make the connection in order to get the data. But ultimately, we need to get the data somehow. It's just how much bang are you getting for your buck? When it comes to the cost and the benefit of each one of these choices. So there are upfront costs, but there are long-term benefits, and I think I've already kind of hit on some of those benefits so far. Accuracy, timeliness, manual effort, and one key one that I don't think I talk about in this presentation, but I'm going to right here because I think it's really important, is that there's a clear difference between ECQM measurement and CQM measurement. And you probably already know this. ECQM, it's got to be a structured data field from the EHR. And that's very strict with the ECQMs. It's got to be coded correctly. It's got to come from this particular field, and that's how you're going to ultimately get credit as an ECQM measure. CQMs will, of course, be pulling from structured data fields, but it also allows for what they call chart review. So this is some of the information that lives in the notes, in the unstructured data of clinical records. Again, a clear difference between a QRDA1 file and a direct EHR connection like ours. A QRDA1 file does not give you notes. So in your scenario with a QRDA1 file, you're going into the EHR, you're looking for the notes and the data insights. that will tell you that a depression screening actually happened, and then you can manually enter it, often cases in that vendor's quality reporting solution as, yes, for CQMs we're getting credit for it, but we know we're not for ECQMs. With a direct EHR connection like ours, we use keyword searches built on top of unstructured data. So when we do CQM measurement, we're actually looking at that unstructured data as well. So when you think about your 10,000, 100,000, maybe more patient population, whether it's your Medicare population or your all patient, all payer requirement, if you're doing that manually because you only have QRDA 1 files or because your direct EHR connection doesn't look at unstructured data, either way, that's an insurmountable amount of work in order for you to get the credit that you deserve. And a key risk, again, in order to help you ensure that you're maximizing your performance, your quality, and ultimately your shared savings. So we have our next polling question. I know Garrett's going to chime in here with your instructions.
All right, just like before, I'm going to go ahead and pull it up on your screen. You're going to see it. Okay, and this one is, how has your organization chosen a measurement and reporting method yet? And again, just to remind you, these are anonymous, so you can answer honestly here, and we're going to show the results momentarily so you can see where you stack among your colleagues. And the results are pouring in here, so I'm going to give it a few more seconds. And I think most folks have answered, so we're going to, I'll wrap it up in about 10 seconds here. And 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, and I'm going to go ahead and show the results. Okay, so the results are for yes, Medicare CQM is 33%. For yes, ECQM, 37%. Yes, MIPS CQM is 11%, and then all of the above is 19%.
Interesting.
Did you get those, James?
I did. Thank you very much. And thank you all for participating in that. That's very interesting. So again, I knew based on what I saw from the attendee list, these are people that understand these different requirements. Thank God, I will say on behalf of the group and everyone on the call, that we got this new option late last year of the Medicare CQMs. It reduces the burden significantly to just your Medicare population, and it would have been nice if they reduced the measure that patient population for all 3 different measurement standards. Although I guess we wouldn't need MIPS CQM if they did that. But either way, the measurements are the same 3 measures, the different ways that you can report the same 3 measures, but how you measure those are different. But again, how you submit is actually the same. And one of the cool things to know, hopefully everyone already knows this, but again, you have those 3 quality measures. You can choose to depression screening to be an ECQM measure, and hypertension to be a Medicare CQM measure, et cetera, et cetera. Ultimately, we want to present all 3 ways. So all the aboves is great. We want to give you all 3 ways so that you can see which reporting method gives you the maximum performance and ultimately the maximum shared savings. So we have been submitting a combination of these measures again since the first performance year in 2021. So lots of great experience there and a lot of great calls with CMS talking about how we've done what we've done with our customers. So your decisions should align with your organization's specific needs. And that's obviously very, very important. No ACO is exactly the same. And we understand that when you have multiple TINs and multiple EHRs, you don't control those practices. These organizations kind of function independently, and they typically like that. That's why they are independent. But their participation in your ACO and their participation in value-based care, of course, is extremely important. as we hopefully continue to grow value-based care and prioritizing patient outcomes as the main measurement of how we provide care. So based on what EHRs are in my network, what control I might have, what resources I have within my ACO, am I okay taking on the burden of having to chase around all these different gaps and making sure that information is being documented appropriately? Do I have those resources? Do I want to be the middleman between the practices and their own EHR vendors to make sure that we're getting these QRDA ones and they're in a timely, accurate format, et cetera? So these are all, again, specific to each organization that we work with. We uncover all the different challenges and really turn those into opportunities. Whenever possible, I think the pull method is our go-to best practice, but I'll be interested in hearing about your comments and questions as we go forward here. So I've just kind of listed some questions that I think about as I think about these risks, but I want to hear from you. Hopefully we've already filled up the Q&A comment box, and Garrett's going to list off a bunch of different questions here that we can talk about. But know that as we do go through questions, if we don't get to your question on this call, we will. I'll actually email you with sort of the best answer that I can. Or feel free always to contact me. I think my contact information will be on the screen, the ending screen once we are done here. So. What's the best reporting method for my ACO? What if my EMR is not responsive and cooperative? Think about the risks and think about how these decisions are going to impact your organization, whether it be, again, the effort that it's going to take or how your performance might suffer as a result of these. Garrett.
All right. Well, this was a fantastic presentation. Obviously, there's a lot of information here, and your head may be spinning around. You may not even know the question to ask yet, which is okay. You can submit that later to us. But we do have a number of questions that came in, and we're going to get to these in no particular order here. So let me go ahead and ask this one first. With an EHR integration, are you forced to submit as MIPS CQM or Medicare CQM and thus use those less favorable benchmarks? Or can you submit it as an ECQM? If so, what file type are you producing if it's not a QRDA 1-3? Does that make any sense to you, James? That may be one we need to follow up by email if you don't. Uh-oh, we lost audio on you, James, for some reason.
You have the ability to be able to report on any of the three different methods. So there are multiple ways that you can submit to Medicare. One of them is by producing a QRDA 3 file that can then be sent on to a qualified registry and submitted for you. Most qualified registries will have an API directly to CMS. So that's actually what we do. We can produce a QRDA 3 file, but in general, with our user interface, our organization is going through the process, answering all the questions and attesting and writing in their TIN numbers, et cetera. All the information that's required as part of their submission. And once they get to the end of that process, there's simply a submission button that allows us to go ahead and send that through the API directly to CMS. And again, for each one of the measures, hopefully you're measuring all three ways so that you can choose the best method that's right for you.
Great. All right. Next question here is, I was under the impression that if you elected ECQM, it was a percentage of your attributed patients being submitted via QRDA or direct connection rather than an all or nothing?
It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. So it doesn't have to just be a QRDA1 file. So we can get the data in any file format that you can provide it to us. QRDA1 is going to be the one that they basically invented in order to help solve this particular challenge, because CCDAs alone or other file formats are not going to give you everything that you need. So whenever there are other systems, I've mentioned EHRs or QRDA1s, but there are sometimes practice management systems that have data in them that we can utilize in order to do these measure calculations. So it doesn't matter what file format, it doesn't matter what file type, uh, what the interface is. What does matter is that the data has not been manipulated between the EHR and us, where we do the measure calculation. So if you have an enterprise data warehouse, which many of you probably already have, um, if you are editing that data or adding that to that clinical record outside of the EHR, we can't utilize that data for measure calculation. We also can't use claims data for ECQM calculation. ECQM is a big one where you can't use unstructured notes for ECQ calculation. You can't use claims data. It has to be documented in the EHR, specifically in those structured fields. So that's one thing that's, again, key to who you choose to work with. Do they understand this program? Do they know the requirements? Or are you having to teach them what the requirements are? Our experience, again, having ongoing dialogue with CMS, we know that we have the confidence in knowing that what we're doing is the right thing, and that we'll have ideas for you if there is a workaround that's needed. I'll stop
Wonderful.
there.
Next question here is, could you have a combination of QRDA ones and direct EHR connections across the various EHRs in an ACO?
That actually is often the case. Again, our first option is always going to be to explore the pull option. Politics may intervene, and they may say, well, we don't let anybody pull data out of our EHR, and we've come across that, in which case push is the only option. So we'll figure out, again, is QRDA1 the best option, or are there other different ways that we can potentially get access to that data? We want as accurate and complete data as we can in order to make sure you're getting the credit you deserve for the quality of care you provide. So no, there's a combination, and hybrids are the norm when it comes to our scope of work and the actual projects that we're working on with the 56 ACOs that we're currently working with.
Wonderful. All right, next question here is, hey, James, do you have the ability to compare ECQM versus MIPS CQM versus Medicare CQMs versus WIQM, 10 measures with electronic manual data entered in an interface? Thanks. I don't
Yeah,
know if that makes sense to you.
it does. It does, because again, I'm focusing on the MIPS measures, but their measures have been a thing for a long time. There's lots of different versions of them. We got HEDIS measures. We got variations of depression screening measures. Some people want to change the age from 50 to 45, and et cetera, et cetera. Again, you can imagine throughout the course of our history, having worked with registries, again, they have been asking us for these different specialty specific type of quality measures to be built. So we have all those quality measures, and your dashboards that we present to you, if you're a customer of ours, will show you all the different things that you've asked us to measure. So ECQMs, Medicare CQMs, MIPS CQMs, the web interface measures, if that's something that you're participating in, your dashboards are customized based on what is important to your organization. So we don't provide any more measures than what you've asked us for. But yeah, those dashboards are available. They're available at the provider level. So you have provider views, you have practice views, and then you have ACO views. The important thing about the ACO view is that that's where we're measuring we're doing your measure calculation based on your deduplicated patient list. That's one of the things I didn't mention right off the bat. You got to deduplicate your patients from all these different systems. Providers and practices, we don't dedupe. We want them to see all their patients and how their qualities measure up based on their particular population. But at the ACO level, we do duplicate those patients, and again, we're giving that ACO an accurate reflection of their quality scores and their PI scores and their IA scores, all within one dashboard. And at the end of the year, they simply go through the final questions that they need before they hit that submit button.
Wonderful. And for all of these, by the way, I apologize if any of them are redundant. Your knowledge
Sure.
base is a lot more than me, but this one, can we use claim CPT2 codes for Medicare CQMs?
You can. So as long as that data lives somewhere within the EHR and you can attest that the information that led you um, to indicate that that patient has been screened, yes, you can use that data. The question is, how are you going to fill those gaps? Is it going to be a manual process, or are you able to map that somehow so that you're getting the credit from that data source that you need to do the measure calculation?
Wonderful. Next question here is there a max number of EHRs that you will work with for a reporting period? We have several hundred across our national ACO.
That's challenging. And you see me smile because I understand. I kind of feel the pain of the question. No, there's no maximum. Again, you think about our registry experience. We've connected to thousands of practices across the country, all with different EHRs, different versions of their EHRs, different documentation styles and workflows, and all that type of stuff. We don't have a limit, but of course, each one of those is going to be its own challenge and something that we have to, again, scope out and figure out what's the best method for that for your ACO. But certainly no maximum on our side. In terms of how much time does it take, that's another
Mhm.
thing. Like, I don't have enough time. 2025 is quickly approaching. How long does it take to do a direct integration? Um, I've quoted this for other organizations. I know sometimes it's a months long process to get a
Mhm.
connection to a particular EHR. With our methods, if we have experience, it's a 2 week process before we kind of are in the validation and verification stages, and about a 4 to 5 week period for us to be comfortable enough where things are flowing and we are no longer having to do that validation. Doesn't mean we don't, because we will continue to get feedback from practices that says, well, you're not calculating this correct. You're not pulling this correct. This data is wrong. And that happens. That should be a normal part of the process. It's whether or not your vendor is going to be capable enough to accept that feedback and make the changes necessary quickly, like we can, based on, again, our experience and how we are able to connect.
Gotcha. Okay, next question. They keep coming. Uh, when do we have to transition away from the CMS web interface? Was last year the last year?
This year is the last year. So performance year 2024 is the last year that you can rely on the web interface. Again, maybe you're dual submitting, and hopefully you're actually performing better already with the new method and the new requirements. Um, for I've been doing this for a few years now, and prior to this year, I've been preaching about getting the experience while you can. Use this runway. It's been optional since 2021. Use this runway to figure out your kinks, because ultimately it doesn't really matter. You're still going to get at least the credit that you've always gotten by doing the web interface work at the end of the year. But perhaps if you're practicing now, you will get reimbursed because they actually made it the incentives a lot higher during this optional period. So there was lots of different kind of apples to bite in terms of being an early adopter. I didn't see a lot of early adopters. Most of the ones that are early adopters, if you still want to call them that, are the ones that are doing it for this year, performance year 2024. This, again, just to answer the question again, this is the last year that web interface is continuing to be an option. Starting in 2025, one of these three new reporting methods must be followed.
Great. And then the next one is, do the ACOs, are they required to use MRO for a record retrieval company?
There's no requirement to utilize other areas of our business. No, these are very um, project specific type of use cases. So again, our experience in the registry business, this new opportunity for us to work with ACOs kind of just fell in our lap in many ways. Whereas when we look at our competitors, many of them are coming from the web interface world. They've worked with ACOs that wanted to outsource that manual effort. They didn't want to staff it, and it just was important, but they didn't have the extra staff in order that they could dedicate to that type of manual work. So we're competing a lot with those types of companies, and those organizations are only able to consume QRDA1 files. Again, think about like an Excel spreadsheet. They're combining all these Excel spreadsheets. They're calculating the measures based on what they know, and they've been doing measure calculation for a long time, so that's not out of their wheelhouse. But they're not data companies, so they may not offer the options that we do based on our experience having worked with the different medical societies, having been a clinical data repository, and slicing and dicing and working with different organizations to get access to data, again, to truly reflect the quality of care they provide.
Great. And we have time for maybe one or two quick last questions here. This one, are there any particular EHRs that are more difficult to connect with or work with?
They are, and I don't like to name names. I've worked for a couple companies out there, and I hate to defend them. But let me just give them one defense. MSSP ACOs are a small part of their overall business. They're getting requests for different files from probably your health systems for things that are impacting revenue much more than what the MSSP part of their business. And as an ACO, you know that you're not the EHR's customer. It's your practices. If you're an ACO that has one managed group of physicians, you do have more control over the EHR and the vendors and all those different requests. But if you don't have any managed physicians within your particular ACO or a large health system that is providing a majority of the care for your network, there's a lot less control. And so these requirements have been in place for a long time. Some EHR companies still haven't gotten to the point where they can produce a QRDA1 file. That's concerning. And this is not like a small niche type of EMR. They're ones that you probably have right now in your network. So their capabilities aren't all there. And then, there's just some that have that reputation that whenever you want your own data, they're going to charge you for it. And I hate to name names, but you did ask a question. Who is it? eClinicalWorks is notorious for kind of nickel and diming you with respect to this type of stuff. So if that's within your network, we'll help as much as we can, but we can't certainly control what they're going to charge you for their end of this project.
Gotcha. And we have time for maybe one last one, if hopefully it's a quick answer, but it says, what do you mean when you say that there are 3 different ways to report? What is the MIPS way of reporting?
So MIPS was one of the first 2 options that's been in place since 2021. And MIPS is the exact same thing as Medicare CQMs. You can look at unstructured data. You can calculate based on chart reviews and pulling from outside data sources. But MIPS CQMs was still an all-payer, all patient requirement. So most people are going to choose Medicare CQMs rather than MIPS CQMs. But again, in some cases, MIPS CQMs may be more advantageous. So the calculation is the same as Medicare CQMs, but the population is all patient, all payer. So that's the main difference between those 2.
Great. Awesome. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, and the questions keep rolling in. So keep sending them. We'll get back to you through email. Thank you all so much. James, thank you. This is a fantastic presentation. As we're wrapping up, real quick, I want to encourage you all to head over to bbcexhibithall.com, and you can check out the MRO exhibit booth. There's a virtual exhibit booth. James, if I could have you go to that next slide there. And you'll see a little, there it is. And on the slides that we're going to send out, you'll get a link to this as well. And there's a lot of really cool resources there. You can look up on what they're doing in the space, kind of educate yourself on that, and of course, reach out to them through there. But if you would like to reach out directly, feel free to do so. If you could go to the last slide, James. James' information is right here on this slide. Feel free to reach out, call him, email him, and reach out with your question, or feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm happy to facilitate an introduction if that's easier. But again, I want to thank you all so much for spending your afternoon with us. James, thank you again for a fantastic presentation, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you, folks. Bye bye.